Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world where beauty and danger blend in ways your local drugstore aisle could never prepare you for. Imagine yourself standing in the dusty heat of ancient Egypt, the Nile glinting in the distance, and the scent of oils, lotus blossoms, and, well, other less glamorous things wafting through the air. You're about to witness the strange rituals that people once trusted to keep themselves young, alluring, and, if we're being honest, probably itchy. And yes, you probably won't survive this beauty routine if you tried it at home. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love for you to let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk along a shaded colonnade, the limestone still warm under your bare feet. The hum of insects rises from the reeds. Ahead, a young woman is painting her eyes with thick black kohl, the stuff you've seen in museums or eyeliner ads. But here it's freshly mixed, ground from galena ore, thick as tar. She drags it across her eyelids with a steady hand, not just for glamour, but because Egyptians believed kohl had protective powers against the sun's glare and even evil spirits. That's your mainstream fact, eyeliner as both medicine and magic. But then comes the quirky part. A clay jar is opened, and the contents are, let's just say, not exactly clinique. Inside is crocodile dung, sun-dried and powdered, mixed into pastes or suppositories used as early contraception. Imagine some poor soul whispering, "Trust me, it works," while handing you a jar of literal reptile poop. Modern pharmacy shelves suddenly look like paradise, don't they? You picture a teenage scribe scribbling notes about whether anyone actually enjoyed this ritual. The air smells faintly of honey, too, because that was another ingredient Egyptians adored, using it in lotions, masks, and even embalming fluids. Honey is timeless, but pair it with crocodile excrement, and you've got skincare that belongs on a prank show. Historians still argue whether this method was sincerely believed effective or was more symbolic, a way of invoking the fierce Nile creature's protective power. You, meanwhile, are trying not to laugh as a priest solemnly prepares the paste as if it's some luxury spa formula. As you linger, a noblewoman gestures for her servant to grind malachite, a shimmering green mineral, into powder. She applies it beneath her eyes, giving her a look somewhere between regal goddess and 1980s punk rocker. This cosmetic ritual was so common that whole tombs were stocked with palettes and brushes, as if the afterlife required eternal touch-ups. You wonder how many centuries of eyeliner smudges decorate the invisible corners of history. The heat presses down, and a light joke flits into your mind. Somewhere, an ancient teenager probably complained, "Ugh, Mom, everyone's wearing the blue shade, and you only bought me black kohl." Trends are eternal, aren't they? Nearby, a man massages perfumed oils into his skin. Egyptians bathed daily, more than most ancient cultures, and considered scent not just hygiene, but moral duty. Smelling nice was a sign of purity. You half expect him to lean over and whisper a sales pitch like a modern influencer. Use code FAIRAOH20 for 20% off your next jar of lotus oil. A child runs by, his hair shaved except for one side lock, a style marking youth. The boy giggles, sticky with date juice, leaving behind dusty footprints. You can almost hear the eternal parental sigh of, "Don't get dirt on your clean tunic." Even then, kids found ways to undo hours of grooming. By the riverbank, workers rubbed natron salts on their skin, both as deodorant and a kind of antiseptic scrub. The sensation must be rough, like a natural exfoliant, but it kept them fresh in the brutal heat. You think of modern spa salt scrubs and chuckle. It seems we've been recycling the same ideas for thousands of years, minus the dung, hopefully. And here's another oddity. Wigs. Shaved heads kept lice at bay, and wigs, often perfumed with cones of scented wax, were worn not just for fashion, but comfort. Picture yourself seated at a banquet, and suddenly your wax cone begins to melt down your wig like some slow candle disaster. A mix of elegance and inconvenience, not unlike wearing high heels at a muddy festival. The sky deepens with sunset. A breeze from the Nile cools your skin, carrying scents of frankincense and myrrh. Priests chant in the distance, their robes brushed with the same oils that touch noble brows. You sense the duality of it all. Cosmetics not merely surface decoration, but spiritual armor, warding off disease, demons, and decay. You tuck away this thought, every jar of coal, every perfumed wig, every jar of honey, and, yes, even crocodile dung was part of a larger worldview. Beauty wasn't vain, it was survival. You leave the colonnade with an odd respect for these choices. Strange, fragrant, sometimes repulsive, but stitched into the rhythm of life here by the Nile. And as you walk into the cooling twilight, you whisper to yourself, "Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Yeah, I'll stick with SPF 50. You step away from the Nile's perfumed breezes and into a land where rivers are muddy. The streets are crowded, and the smell is, let's call it, strong. Welcome to Mesopotamia, where your breakfast isn't toast or porridge, but a thick, yeasty drink that blurs the line between food and alcohol. Yes, you're about to sip your way into the birthplace of civilization, where beer wasn't just a happy hour treat, but a literal daily staple. You wander through a bustling marketplace in Ur, sunlight bouncing off clay tablets etched with cuneiform. A baker sells flatbreads, their scent mixing with roasting goat. But the real crowd gathers at a stall where massive clay jars, sealed with reeds, bubble faintly. A woman dips in a ladle, pours frothy liquid into bowls, and then, here's the catch, hands you a straw made of reed. No mugs clinking here. Instead, people lean over communal pots, sucking up beer like oversized toddlers at a juice stand. Mainstream historical fact. Mesopotamian beer was thick, more like liquid bread than a clear golden pint. It was packed with nutrients, a safe way to hydrate in a world where river water wasn't exactly pristine. And people of all classes drank it, from laborers hauling bricks to kings wearing lapis necklaces. Even the gods, according to myth, got tipsy on it, like Ninkasi, the goddess of beer, who had entire hymns dedicated to her boozy blessings. Here comes the quirky tidbit. Archaeologists have found straws tipped with bits of precious metal, gold or lapis lazuli. Imagine flexing on your neighbors with a bejeweled beer straw, like the ancient version of a Stanley Cup. You can't help but laugh at the thought of someone saying, "No thanks, I don't share straws," while leaning in anyway because, well, hygiene standards were not top tier. A scribe scratches on a clay tablet nearby, recording rations. Workers were often paid in beer, sometimes up to 2 liters a day. Picture your boss handing you a frothy jug instead of a paycheck. On bad days, maybe you'd ask, "Can I get a raise, or at least a stronger brew?" Historians still argue whether people were constantly tipsy, or whether the lower alcohol content just kept them gently buzzed all the time. Either way, productivity meetings must have been interesting. You take a sip. It's sour, earthy, grainy. Imagine oatmeal left too long on the counter but somehow refreshing. You cough slightly and the brewer smirks as if to say, "First time, huh?" Around you, the clatter of donkeys and bargaining merchants makes the place feel oddly modern. Everyone multitasks, buying fish, haggling over dates, and slurping beer before heading back to work on irrigation canals. The sun beats down, and a priest arrives to bless the jars. Beer wasn't just sustenance, it was sacred. Temples stored massive vats, and rituals often involved libations poured for the gods. You can almost hear a whispered prayer. May the canals flow. May the harvest be rich. May this beer never run dry. As you lean against a mud brick wall, you notice another custom. Clay tokens shaped like loaves and jars are exchanged. Early receipts for bread and beer distribution. Basically, Mesopotamia invented not just alcohol, but also paperwork to track it. Bureaucracy and hangovers, hand in hand. You roll your eyes and mutter, "Thanks, ancestors." Nearby, children gnaw on bread dipped in diluted beer, their laughter shrill in the heat. It wasn't taboo for kids. After all, it was nutrition in liquid form. You picture a mom saying, "No more beer before bed, you'll never sleep." Some things never change. The breeze carries dust from the ziggurat looming in the distance. Priests climb its steps, robes flapping, while vendors keep shouting, "Dates, fish, spices." You clutch your reed straw and wonder how many lifetimes of human history were fueled by this foamy staple. Beer wasn't just a drink. It was economy, religion, social glue. And just when you're settling in, a drunk man starts loudly singing about Inanna, the goddess of love. His friend tries to shush him, but the whole square chuckles. That's joke number 3 for you. Apparently, even in 2000 BCE, karaoke nights existed, minus the neon lights, plus a lot more mud. You set down your bowl, the taste still lingering. A scribe waves a tablet in your direction, covered in wedge-shaped impressions. Maybe it's a hymn, maybe it's an invoice for 10 jars of beer. Either way, you smile at the thought that one of humanity's first written records was literally about bar tabs. As the sky turns copper, you follow the crowd away from the jars, your head light, but your stomach strangely satisfied. Civilization, you realize, isn't built on bricks alone. It's built on the comfort of sharing a drink, the warmth of communal laughter, and the daily ritual of turning grain and water into something that feels just a little magical. And as you step into the dusk, you whisper to yourself, "Breakfast of champions? Try breakfast of Mesopotamians." The air thickens as you leave behind the dusty streets of Mesopotamia and slip into the humid jungles of Mesoamerica. Cicadas hum like rattling maracas, and the shadows of massive temples fall across plazas where incense curls toward the sky. Tonight you find yourself among the Maya, where devotion to the gods isn't shown through quiet prayers or temple donations. It's carved, quite literally, from human skin. You shuffle forward with a nervous crowd, the sound of drums and conch shells echoing off stone walls. Torches flare, and the rulers of the city emerge, their headdresses towering, feathers rippling like waves of a rainbow. Their faces are calm, regal, but their hands clutch obsidian blades sharp enough to slice skin like paper. This is no stage trick. This is bloodletting, an offering thought necessary to keep the universe in balance. Here's your mainstream fact. The Maya believed blood contained chulel, or sacred life force. By letting their own blood flow, especially from rulers and priests, they nourished the gods and ensured cosmic order. Crops, rain, warfare, all of it was tied to these crimson gifts. It wasn't optional, it was survival on a spiritual level. And the quirky detail? They didn't always go for the arm or the leg. Instead, they chose spots loaded with symbolism and pain, tongues, ears, even the most sensitive areas you're already crossing your legs about. Picture an emperor calmly threading a rope studded with thorns through his tongue, while his subjects cheer. You mutter to yourself, "I suddenly prefer crocodile dung sunscreen." The drums grow louder. A queen kneels, obsidian blade in hand, and presses it against her tongue. A single cut, then another, and she pulls a woven cord through, crimson drops splattering onto bark paper. Attendants rush to collect it, roll it up, and toss it into a blazing brazier. The flames leap higher, sparks joining the night sky. Smoke twists upward, and in it, you almost think you see the faint outline of a serpent rising, jaws open, carrying the prayers to the heavens. Historians still argue whether these visions were spiritual encounters or hallucinatory results of pain, incense, and fatigue. But to the Maya, there was no debate. The gods answered through smoke, visions, and the dizzying dance of firelight. Children peek from behind pillars, wide-eyed but not horrified. This is normal to them, like you watching fireworks on the 4th of July. You imagine a kid tugging on his mother's sleeve, whispering, "When I grow up, can I bleed for the gods too?" And the mom sighing, "We'll talk when you're older." Nearby, a scribe etches the event into stone, chiseling each drop of blood as carefully as an artist painting with gold. The ruler's sacrifice isn't just for the gods, it's a political statement, proof of their dedication, their right to lead. "I suffer for you," their wounds declare. Pain becomes propaganda, and yet amid the solemnity, you can't help but chuckle at the thought of an unlucky noble muttering, "Not the tongue again. Can't we just do the ear?" Rituals are rarely democratic. The smell of burning copal resin mixes with blood and sweat. Priests sway, chanting. You notice the ropes used in these rituals, sometimes woven with stingray spines, sharp enough to shred skin. A grimace escapes your lips. Pain was the currency of devotion, and some willingly paid in installments, far beyond what most of us could endure. Still, not all bloodletting was dramatic. Sometimes it was small, personal. A farmer nicking his ear before planting maize, a hunter offering a drop before setting out. Devotion wasn't reserved for kings. Everyone had a vein in the game, so to speak. As the ritual peaks, the ruler staggers but doesn't falter. Attendants fan incense, supporters cheer, and the night sky crackles with unseen energy. The people believe their gods are satisfied, that tomorrow's sun will rise strong. And for a moment, standing there with your modern discomfort, you feel the weight of that belief too. The ceremony winds down. The rulers retreat to cleanse themselves, wounds bound in cloth, faces pale but proud. The crowd disperses, buzzing with relief. And you slip into the shadows, tongue pressed against your teeth in sympathetic pain. The jungle hums louder as you walk away. A frog croaks, unseen birds flutter. You think back to the woman with crocodile dung paste and the Mesopotamian beer straws. Strange, yes, but this is next-level dedication. To bleed for the cosmos, to burn your own essence so that maize will grow and rain will fall, that's not a casual superstition. That's belief woven so tightly into daily life it draws blood, literally. And with a half-nervous laugh, you whisper, "Well, at least they didn't serve beer with a side of tongue cutting, right?" You leave behind the torchlit plazas of the Maya and step into the bright marble courtyards of ancient Greece. The air smells of olive oil and sweat, and the sound of sandals scuffing against polished stone fills your ears. Before you stretches the gymnasium, a word that literally comes from gymnos, meaning naked. And yes, that's your warning. You're about to walk into a space where everyone is working out in the buff. The morning sun glances off bronzed skin as athletes stretch, wrestle, and race. You shift uncomfortably, trying to keep eye contact as men lunge past, glistening with oil, their bodies slicked down like prized racehorses. Here's your mainstream fact. In classical Greece, exercise wasn't just about fitness. It was about preparing for war, celebrating beauty, and honoring the gods. They believed a fit body was a moral body, a reflection of inner virtue. So the gymnasium was part fitness center, part spiritual practice, and part social club. And the quirky tidbit? After sweating buckets, these men didn't just towel off. No, they scraped the mixture of sweat, oil, and dirt from their bodies with a curved tool called a strigil. Sometimes they even bottled the gunk, called gloios, and sold it as a kind of medicinal ointment. Imagine paying good money for celebrity gym sweat, except it's literally everyone's. You chuckle, picturing an ancient Greek mom telling her kid, "Don't waste that, it's good for your skin." You find a shady spot by a column as philosophers gather, debating between rounds of discus and wrestling. This wasn't just a place for physical training, but also for education. Young men learned philosophy, poetry, even politics, often while still dripping in olive oil. You think of modern universities with gyms and libraries separate, and smirk. Here, it was all mashed together. Historians still argue whether nudity was purely about aesthetics or if it carried deeper symbolic meaning. Was it freedom from shame? A way to emphasize equality? Or just an excuse to flex those abs? Whatever the case, you notice no one here seems self-conscious. In fact, they're proud, striding around as though their bodies are arguments in a debate. The clatter of shields echoes as hoplites. Citizen soldiers practice maneuvers. Their bodies, honed in these very spaces, will soon be tested in battle. You think back to your last attempt at push-ups and mutter, "Yep, I'd be dead within minutes." Nearby, a trainer barks instructions, his voice echoing off stone. Young boys run laps, their laughter sharp in the hot air. Some stumble, only to be lifted and dusted off by older athletes. Camaraderie is part of the workout. You imagine one teenager whispering, "Do we really have to do this naked?" And his friend shrugging, "It's tradition." And then comes a funny little moment. A dog trots through, tail wagging, utterly unfazed by the nude chaos, before curling up in the shade of a pillar. You can't help but smile at the timelessness of dogs crashing workouts. As you wander, the air thickens with the smell of fresh bread wafting from nearby stalls. Athletes often followed exercise with food, washing down their exertion with bread, figs, or wine. Not exactly protein shakes, but it kept them going. You imagine some jock complaining, "Too many carbs," and a philosopher replying, "Carbs are the foundation of the cosmos." The sound of a flute drifts through the courtyard, calming, almost hypnotic. You realize the gymnasium was as much about harmony as exertion, a blending of body, mind, and spirit. This wasn't sweating for six-pack abs. This was sweating for philosophy, civic pride, and maybe the admiration of a few onlookers. A young athlete pauses to scrape his skin with a strigil, amber oil glinting in the sun. He glances your way, unashamed, before handing the gunk to a waiting servant. You recoil, then laugh, remembering the crocodile dung, the sour beer, the bleeding tongues. Somehow bottled sweat doesn't seem so bad after all. As the day grows hotter, The athletes shift to shade, debating poetry and tactics, bodies still gleaming. You walk away, sandals crunching, wondering how on earth anyone managed to focus on Play-Doh while covered in olive oil. The marble steps cool under your feet, and as you glance back one last time, you whisper, "Note to self, modern gyms may smell terrible, but at least everyone's clothed." You step away from the shining marbles of Greece and wander into the heart of Rome, where the air hums with chatter, the splash of fountains, and the faint but unmistakable tang of ammonia. You wrinkle your nose almost immediately, because tonight's adventure drops you right in the middle of Rome's dirtiest little secret, Laundry Day. And in this empire, soap isn't what you expect. Instead, garments are cleaned with buckets of urine. Yes, you heard that right. The streets are alive with vendors hawking figs and olives, but your attention is dragged toward a building where men stomp barefoot in enormous vats. At first, you think it's grape pressing, and you almost perk up at the thought of free wine, until the smell hits you. This is no vineyard. It's a Fulanica, a Roman laundry house, and those vats are filled with a mixture of water, clay, and collected urine. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Ammonia in urine acted as a natural bleaching and cleaning agent. Romans discovered it lifted dirt, softened fabric, and whitened togas. Practical? Absolutely. Pleasant? Not remotely. The process was so vital that emperors even taxed urine collection, famously leading to Vespasian's quip, "Money does not stink." You can almost hear the tax collectors sigh. Oh, it stinks plenty. Now for the quirky detail. Urine wasn't just scooped out of sewers. People actually contributed by relieving themselves into large public jars set up on the streets. Imagine strolling through the forum, hearing debates about politics and philosophy, and then spotting a line of amphorae inviting passers-by to donate. Talk about civic duty. You chuckle at the thought of someone muttering, "Sorry, I already contributed this morning." Inside the laundry, men stomp rhythmically, garments sloshing beneath their feet. They sing work songs to drown out the smell, voices echoing in the tiled chamber. Some togas emerge sparkling white, others tinged with the faint memory of their treatment. You wonder if the aristocrats ever thought twice while donning their spotless robes, or if denial was part of the luxury package. Historians still argue whether laundries added herbs or perfumes afterward to mask the odor. Some suggest sprigs of rosemary or lavender were tossed in. Others believe Romans simply grew used to the pungent aroma. You glance around and mutter, "Honestly, I'd pay double for a rosemary upgrade." A young apprentice scrapes stains with fuller's earth, a type of clay. Another wrings out cloth before laying it on rooftops to bleach in the sun. The effect is impressive. Garments emerge gleaming if you ignore the mental backstory. You picture a senator giving a fiery speech in the forum, toga dazzlingly white, while you whisper from the crowd, "Nice pea polish, sir." A little humor bubbles up as a donkey outside tries to drink from one of the collection jars, only to be shooed away by a boy yelling, "That's for the laundry, not you." Even animals apparently knew better. The laundries aren't just about washing. They're social hubs. Workers gossip, joke, and grumble as they stomp. One complains about sore feet, another about stingy clients. You realize this place has the same atmosphere as a modern laundromat. Equal parts boredom, camaraderie, and judgment about who has the dirtiest socks. As you lean against a wall, the air shifts with the faint whiff of perfumes from a nearby stall. Romans loved to douse themselves in strong scents after bathing. Musk, rose, or exotic spices. Maybe it wasn't vanity so much as survival. masking the odors of a city crammed with bodies, beasts, and yes, laundry vats. Your mind drifts back to Egypt's honeyed oils and Greece's bottled sweat, and you laugh softly. Every culture seems to have drawn a line somewhere between practical and gross, but Rome leapt right over that line and taxed it. The sun lowers, casting golden light over tiled roofs. Workers lay the last togas out to dry, their feet raw from hours of stomping. You can almost feel the relief as they step out into the cooler evening air, leaving behind the steamy chambers. And you, still wrinkling your nose, whisper to yourself, "Next time I see a white sheet billowing in the breeze, I'll try really hard not to think about how it got that way." You wander deeper into this strange nighttime gallery of human habits, and suddenly the ground beneath you feels scorched, brittle, like the embers of a fire have kissed it. A table lies before you, flat bones spread across it like cracked parchment, each one etched with tiny marks. You lean in closer, realizing you are staring at the relics of ancient Chinese divination. Oracle bones, used thousands of years ago to peer into the future. The air smells of smoke, and you watch as a diviner holds a tortoise shell over a small flame. The heat creeps across the surface, and then, crack, a jagged line splits the smooth bone. The crowd around you falls silent as the priest traces the fissures with his finger. To them, this is no accident. It is a message from the spirits, from ancestors whispering through fire. You are struck by how serious this feels. In your world, you might flip a coin or consult a horoscope for fun. But here in Shang Dynasty China, the outcome of a war, a harvest, or even a royal marriage might hinge on how a shell cracks. You imagine an anxious king waiting to hear if his army should march north. The priest studies the bone's veins like a map of destiny and declares, yes, victory lies ahead, or perhaps no, disaster waits. One crack, one judgment, and thousands of lives are nudged in one direction. The carvings on the bones are even stranger. Questions like, will it rain tomorrow? Or, will the queen's childbirth be safe? Are scratched into the surface. Sometimes, after the answer is given, a short record of what happened is added, turning the bone into a kind of journal. It's almost like the first archive of Chinese writing. You run your finger over those grooves and realize you are looking at the birth of history itself. Not all divinations are grand. Some are shockingly mundane. A noble might ask if it is wise to take a journey that day, or if his crops will sprout properly. Imagine heating up a turtle shell just to decide whether you should go shopping or not. You almost chuckle, almost, until you remember the reverence in the diviner's face. To them, there is nothing trivial about the unseen world. Of course, historians still argue whether the cracks were truly read with meaning, or whether priests gave answers that conveniently matched political agendas. Maybe the bone was just an excuse to affirm what rulers already wanted. Still, the fact that generation after generation trusted in the practice tells you something. Uncertainty has always terrified humans, and fire and bone offered a way to wrestle with the unknown. And the ritual has its own kind of poetry. You imagine sitting before a fire in a palace courtyard, stars above you, ancestors believed to hover close. The bone warms, pops, and splits, and for a moment, the boundary between the living and the dead feels thin. The crack is not just sound, it's a voice. The people lean in, listening to destiny speak through brokenness. The irony is, sometimes they were right. If the diviner said rain would come, and clouds rolled in the next day, the trust deepened. When the prediction failed, memory conveniently blurred. Much like fortune-telling today, the hits are remembered and the misses forgotten. Yet these cracked bones weren't tossed away. They were stored, catalogued, kept in pits near temples. You imagine archaeologists digging them up thousands of years later, stunned at the massive collection of questions and answers, preserved like an ancient FAQ for life. One curious tidbit: tortoise shells were prized because they were thought to hold cosmic power, living so long that they naturally bridged heaven and earth. Kings would sometimes send expeditions just to acquire more shells for divination. Bones of oxen were also common, their flat shoulder blades making good surfaces. Even in death, animals became messengers. Their remains part of human conversation with the gods. You lean back from the firelit scene, the smell of scorched bone still in your nostrils, and you realize you've just witnessed one of the oldest forms of writing, of questioning, of trying to tame the chaos of existence. In a way, the same urge drives you when you check your phone for tomorrow's weather. But here, every crack is heavy with life and death, with the fate of empires. You smile softly at the absurdity and solemnity tangled together. Maybe the shells really did whisper truths, or maybe people simply heard what they needed. Either way, oracle bones remind you that humans will always search for signs, whether in the stars, in tea leaves, or in the splitting of a turtle's back. You find yourself standing on the prow of a longship, the wood creaking beneath your feet as the sea heaves and groans. Salt spray kisses your lips. The horizon stretches in endless gray, and the only question burning in every sailor's mind is, which way is home? You glance around for a compass, a map, even a half-decent GPS signal, but of course there's nothing. Instead, a Viking chieftain beside you lifts a small wicker cage. Inside, a black raven hops and flaps, feathers sleek as midnight. This is no pet. It's a tool of survival. The bird is released into the air with a sharp toss. For a moment, the raven wheels overhead, then strikes out in a direction. Every eye on the ship follows it. If it disappears over the horizon, the sailors know land lies that way. If it circles and returns, it means only open water surrounds them. And so, guided by wings rather than stars, the ship's course is set. It sounds almost laughably risky, navigating the Atlantic on the instincts of a bird. But to the Vikings, it worked. You remember that saga you once skimmed, where Floki Vilgerdarson, an early explorer of Iceland, released ravens during his voyage. When they flew west and never returned, he followed, discovering land rising from the waves. In that moment, ravens weren't omens or metaphors. They were GPS with feathers. Of course, they had other tricks too. Sunstones, crystals that refracted light, may have helped them find the sun on cloudy days. Historians still argue whether this was myth or fact, but the idea of a sailor holding up a glowing stone to glimpse the hidden sun feels oddly cinematic. They also read the sea itself, the color of water, the drift of seaweed, the calls of seabirds. You picture them as detectives, scanning every detail, piecing together a route without charts. The raven, though, carried special weight. To Norse minds, ravens were tied to Odin himself, the god whose two birds, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, flew across the world each day and returned with news. So when a raven left the ship, it wasn't just navigation. It was as if Odin himself was guiding the voyage. You imagine the shiver of reverence as black wings disappeared into mist. And it wasn't all solemn business. Sailors joked about which raven was lazier, which bird seemed too fond of circling back just to get another snack. You can almost hear the laughter mixed with nerves, because after all, trusting your life to an animal's choices is equal parts faith and comedy. One sailor might grumble, Well, if the raven gets lost, we're doomed. And another might reply, don't worry, he's smarter than the captain. Still, the stakes were serious. To misjudge direction on an open ocean meant running out of food, water, and luck. You picture a crew clinging to hope as a bird wings off. Hearts rise when it vanishes straight ahead. Hearts sink when it drifts back and lands with a bored croak. The tension is as sharp as the salt air. Oddly enough, this method shares something with the oracle bones you saw earlier. Both are about reading signs, whether in cracks of shell or in the flight of a raven. Humans crave direction, crave certainty, and whether it's fire or feathers, they reach for answers in whatever is near. You lean against the ship's railing, watching the raven dwindle into the haze. For a moment, the ocean feels infinite, but the men around you relax. They have their heading. You realize that sometimes survival depends not on the tools you build, but on the trust you place in the natural world around you. And perhaps, you think with a smirk, next time your phone battery dies on a road trip, you'll wish you had a raven in the glove compartment. The smoke of the longship fades, and now you're standing on a riverbank where the air feels heavy with incense and the crackle of fire. You realize you've stepped into the world of ancient Indian funerary rites, where death is not an end, but a transition, and where the rituals surrounding it are as practical as they are spiritual. Before you, men carry bundles of wood, sandalwood if the family is wealthy, plain logs if they are not. You notice the sharp difference immediately. For those with money, the smoke rises fragrant, sacred, and for the poor it is coarse and biting. Death here has always been equal, but the fire that consumes the body is very much graded on a scale of class. Merchants bustle nearby, selling ghee to pour on the flames, or cloth to wrap the corpse, or even special oils that claim to speed the soul's departure. You almost want to laugh. Even in mourning, someone is trying to make a sale. The body, wrapped in white cloth, is carried by relatives to the pyre. The eldest son, head shaved in mourning, circles it with a clay pot of water. With each round, he smashes the pot a little more until finally it breaks, water spilling into the dust. The symbolism is stark. Just as the pot is broken, so too is the human body. And then the fire begins. A torch, lit from the eternal flame of a temple, touches the wood. Flames leap up, bright against the dusk. You can feel the heat on your face. There's something raw and direct about this. No sealed coffins, no hidden machinery, just body and fire, earth and sky. You can smell flesh mixing with smoke, and yet in this culture, it is not horror. It is release. Still, money shapes everything. You overhear two men whispering about the cost of sandalwood, how only the wealthy can afford a pyre that burns clean and fragrant. Poor families must scavenge driftwood or even cow dung cakes, desperate for fuel. Imagine trying to honor your father, but bargaining over whether you can afford enough wood to fully reduce his body to ash. There's a dark reality under the solemnity. Funerals are spiritual passages, yes, but they're also marketplaces. Scholars still argue whether this commodification of death cheapened the ritual, or whether it simply reflected life's eternal inequalities. To the mourners, though, there is no choice. The ritual must be done, whether in luxury or in poverty, because without it, the soul is believed to wander restlessly. You think back to your own time, where funeral homes charge for fancy coffins, glossy brochures, and endless extras. It suddenly feels less modern than you thought. Maybe every civilization turns grief into an industry. And yet, there is beauty here too. The ashes, once cooled, are gathered carefully and taken to the river, most often the sacred Ganges. Families wade into the current, letting the last trace of their loved one dissolve into the waters believed to carry souls toward liberation. You stand in the riverbank's mist and hear weeping, but also singing, chants rising with the dawn. There are stranger practices as well. In some regions, certain sects once practiced sky burial, leaving bodies exposed to vultures, the birds seen as holy agents carrying the soul upward. In others, monks meditated beside funeral pyres to confront mortality directly, inhaling the smoke as a reminder of impermanence. You shiver, imagining sitting calmly as fire consumes a human form beside you. And yet, there's wisdom in that stark confrontation with death, something most of us spend our lives avoiding. You step back from the pyre, clothes carrying the scent of wood smoke, and realize how pragmatic and poetic these rites are. They bind family, commerce, faith, and fear into one moment. Death, stripped of mystery, is fire, ash, and ritual. But the questions behind it, where does the soul go, what lingers, what ends, remain unanswerable, the same in your time as theirs. You glance at the merchants still hawking sandalwood to grieving families and smirk quietly. Some things, it seems, never change. Even death has a price tag. You leave the riverside smoke still clinging to your clothes, and when your eyes clear, you're drifting across a wide, shimmering lake. The surface ripples softly, dotted with green rafts so lush they almost look like floating islands. You blink, realizing you've stumbled into the world of the Aztec chinampas, floating gardens, a farming system so unusual it feels like equal parts engineering and magic. The first thing you notice is how fertile everything seems. Stalks of maize rise tall, beans climb upward, squashes crawl across the rafts. You can almost smell the earth, rich and damp. And yet you remind yourself, this isn't dry ground at all, but rafts woven from reeds, piled with mud and lake sediment until they became steady platforms. The Aztecs turned water into farmland, as if refusing to let geography limit them. You watch as a farmer pulls a canoe between the plots, carrying baskets of fresh chili peppers, tomatoes, and flowers. Bright marigolds nod in the breeze, grown not for food, but for rituals. Their orange petals believed to guide spirits in ceremonies like the Day of the Dead. Your modern brain whispers, "So this is the ancestor of the salsa garden," and you chuckle quietly. The system itself is clever. Canals for water, rafts for crops, and willows planted at the edges, their roots knitting the gardens together like stitches in fabric. Nothing is wasted. Night soil, fish remains, and city refuse are all composted into the floating beds, creating a cycle so efficient that even modern sustainability experts admire it. You think of how cities today struggle with waste, while the Aztecs turned garbage into abundance centuries ago. Yet it wasn't just about food. These gardens fed Tenochtitlan, a city of perhaps 200,000 people, larger than many European capitals of its day. Imagine the markets bursting with produce, all of it floated in from the chinampas. You can almost hear the bustle, vendors calling, children weaving between stalls, priests buying flowers for temple offerings. Historians still argue whether the chinampas were truly floating, or more like anchored artificial islands, since many were eventually fixed in place by soil and willow roots. Either way, the ingenuity shines through. To stand on one is to feel ground that shouldn't exist, solid and soft at once, like standing on the skin of the lake itself. Of course, it wasn't all idyllic. You overhear a farmer grumble about pests, swarms of insects feasting on crops, birds swooping down to steal grain. Another mutters about rival clans raiding the chinampas, because food is always power, and whoever controls the harvest controls the city. Even here, among flowers and beans, politics grows as thick as maize stalks, and the water, though beautiful, holds dangers. Canoes capsize in sudden storms, children tumble into canals, and spirits are said to lurk beneath the surface. Some whisper that the goddess Chalchutlicu, mistress of lakes and rivers, must be appeased with offerings, or she may swallow entire gardens into the depths. You glance at the rippling water and half expect a hand to rise and drag you under. One curious detail: farmers worked in silence at times, believing their sweat itself fertilized the crops. They sang to the maize, treating it as family, as kin. You stand there watching a man sprinkle water with careful hands, murmuring softly to the plants, and it feels like you're witnessing not farming, but a prayer. As the sun dips low, the chinampas glow gold, their canals catching firelight. Canoes glide like shadows, piled high with vegetables and flowers. And you realize these floating gardens were more than survival. They were a symbol of mastery over nature, of community tied together by ingenuity. You can't help but grin at the thought. While medieval Europe relied on clumsy fields and fallow rotations, the Aztecs were out here literally farming on water. If there were a prize for most creative gardener, they'd have won centuries ago. And maybe, just maybe, if your houseplants keep dying, you should try building a raft. You drift away from the Aztec canals, and suddenly the air feels still, perfumed with incense and a faint sweetness. Lantern light glows faintly on painted screens, and you realize you've wandered into the courts of Heian-era Japan, where aristocrats glide through shadowed halls in layers of silk, so long they trail behind them like rivers of color. But what catches you off guard is not the poetry or elegance. It's the sight of men and women comparing notes on something far stranger. Who had the best nap? Yes, in a world of calligraphy, moon-viewing parties, and delicate court politics, sleep itself could be judged as a work of art. You picture nobles reclining on tatami mats, heads cushioned on lacquered pillows, as attendants peek in to make sure the angle of their rest looks graceful. When they awake, conversations spark. How deeply did you drift? Was your posture elegant? Did you dream poetically? You almost snort with laughter, because in your time, someone bragging about their nap usually means they drooled on the couch, not that they earned aristocratic admiration. The competition was subtle, but real. An official diary even records nobles comparing who had the most refined drowsiness. Imagine someone announcing at a party, "Ah yes, last night I reached level 3 slumber, most exquisite." You'd roll your eyes, but here it's a mark of sophistication. In the Heian court, where every detail of appearance mattered, from the length of one's sleeves to the perfume of one's robes, sleep was just another stage for performance. There's practical reasoning, too. The Heian elite lived in a world of endless ceremonies, poetry recitals, and moonlit vigils. To nap elegantly in the midst of it all was a survival tactic. A courtier who could rest briefly yet beautifully might impress just as much as one who recited perfect verse. It's strange, but when you think about it, not so different from modern influencers making sleep hygiene videos, only with more incense and fewer ring lights. Historians still argue whether these contests were formalized events or more like playful rivalries, woven into the gossipy tapestry of court life. Either way, it's clear that rest was never just private. Even your unconscious state could be another social performance, Another way to win approval or ridicule. And speaking of ridicule, satirical poems sometimes mocked courtiers who snored too loudly or drooped awkwardly in public. You can almost hear the laughter behind painted fans. Did you see Lord So-and-so dozing like a farmer in the fields? How disgraceful. Even sleep, it seems, was not safe from aristocratic shade. Yet there's a beauty in it, too. Dreaming was considered a connection to the other world, a realm where ancestors and spirits might whisper. A noble might rise and describe a dream to friends, and if it contained auspicious symbols, cranes, blossoms, flowing rivers, it was admired as a sign of fortune. You realize that in a culture where poetry was the highest currency, even dreams became poems of the night, judged for elegance and depth. You catch yourself imagining the scene, candles flickering low, a noblewoman drifting into a nap, her 12-layered robe pooling around her like petals. An attendant notes the angle of her head, the serenity of her breathing. When she wakes, she casually mentions a dream of cherry blossoms falling in silence, and the room sighs in appreciation. Meanwhile, you know that if you described your dream of missing the bus, no one would be impressed. The whole thing is absurd, yes, but also oddly soothing. To treat rest not as laziness, but as art, as refinement, feels like a wisdom your own world has lost. Instead of guzzling coffee to fight exhaustion, these courtiers leaned into sleep, turning it into something graceful, even competitive. As you step back from the silk-draped halls, the scent of incense clinging faintly to your clothes, you smile. Who knew naps could be aristocratic sport? Maybe tonight, when you drift off, you'll imagine yourself as a Heian noble, scored not on snores, but on elegance. You begin to notice how fragile the balance was in medieval cities, where the smallest disruption could cause hunger, chaos, or plague. A single bad harvest meant more than empty tables. It meant bread riots, mobs storming bakeries, and desperate families grinding chestnuts or acorns into flour to survive. You imagine walking through a marketplace in such times. The air tense, the smell of sour bread mixing with anger. Guards stand near granaries, protecting stores of grain as though they were treasure chests, because in truth, they were. Without bread, no city could stand. Sanitation, or rather the lack of it, was another silent force shaping city life. Waste flowed openly through gutters, dumped from chamber pots with a casual shout of warning. You can almost hear the splash, feel the sting of the stench as you walk past. Rats skitter in shadows, feeding on scraps, and with them come fleas and the promise of plague. Wells sometimes stood dangerously close to cesspits, their waters fouled without anyone fully realizing it. Imagine drinking from such a source, the water clear but deadly, carrying dysentery or worse. To live in a medieval city was to live constantly in the presence of invisible dangers. Fires, too, haunted these crowded spaces. Wooden houses, thatched roofs, narrow lanes, all made the city a tinderbox. One spark from a careless hearth could send flames racing from one street to the next. Bells clanged as night watchmen roused citizens to form bucket chains, but often the fire leapt faster than hands could carry water. The charred ruins left behind told silent stories of loss. Shops gone, homes destroyed, families scattered. You can almost feel the heat on your face, the rush of fear as smoke thickens and people push through narrow alleys to escape. Yet amidst these threats, life thrived in bursts of energy. Markets filled with color and noise, artisans hammered in their workshops, and children played in the mud-streaked lanes, oblivious to danger. Festivals erupted with wild joy. Parades of dancers, jugglers, and musicians, shaking tambourines as banners snapped in the wind. For a moment, the burdens of disease, filth, and famine vanished, replaced by laughter and song. You see how people, even weighed down by hardship, found ways to live fully. But as night fell, unease returned. Torches flickered weakly against the darkness, their pools of light leaving most streets in shadow. Thieves prowled, drunkards staggered, and the city seemed to change its face. You hear the heavy boots of the night watch, their calls echoing down empty lanes. Doors and shutters closed tightly, for safety came from walls and bolts, not from trust. In the silence broken only by a distant dog's bark, you sense the weight of fear that hung over every medieval night. And so the city, both vibrant and perilous, pulsed with contradictions. It was a place of wealth and squalor, of joy and danger, of constant motion against an ever-present backdrop of risk. To imagine yourself there is to step into a world where survival itself was a triumph. Each day a delicate balance between work, faith, and luck. The smells of the city linger long after the festival's end. Smoke from hearths curls lazily over rooftops, mingling with the stench of unwashed streets. You notice the open-air slaughterhouses, where animals are butchered without walls, and blood seeps into the soil, staining the cobblestones. Street performers, once part of the day's entertainment, now watch carefully from the shadows, wary of both thieves and the authorities. Every corner seems to carry a story of survival, ingenuity, or misfortune. Commerce, in particular, thrives despite chaos. Merchants haggle over spices, fabrics, and imported goods, their voices sharp and relentless. You see traders from distant lands, their faces marked by foreign suns, speaking languages that twist like rivers around one another. Even in a world of filth, disease, and unpredictability, the city hums with energy. People find ways to trade, to make a living, to carve moments of joy in cramped and dangerous spaces. You imagine a baker measuring flour carefully, praying that his oven doesn't catch fire tonight, while a customer offers a piece of silver in exchange for bread. Every transaction feels both fragile and vital, a microcosm of the city's resilience. Religious life threads through the urban chaos. Cathedrals dominate skylines, bells tolling as if marking both time and fate. Priests bless water, distribute alms, and comfort the sick, their chants echoing through narrow lanes. You notice the paradox. While disease and crime stalk the streets, faith provides both reassurance and control. Pilgrims arrive with fervent hope, sometimes sleeping in doorways, praying for survival. Here, too, life and death mingle intimately. Night reveals yet more tension. Shadows deepen, rats become more brazen, and the hum of the city takes on an eerie tone. Guards patrol slowly, torches flickering, weapons clinking. You see a man stumble, spilling a basket of apples. Another curses, swearing as he chases a thief. The city does not sleep, not really. Even as people retreat indoors, the pulse of danger and commerce continues, unseen but ever present. You take a step back and absorb it all. The crowded alleys, the market noise, the stench and spice, the fleeting beauty of candlelit windows. Life in a medieval city is precarious, a delicate dance of human effort against natural and social hazards. Every day survived feels like a small victory. And you can't help but admire the energy, the stubborn persistence, and the humor that people muster despite constant threats. It's messy, chaotic, sometimes revolting, but undeniably alive. By the time you finally leave the city behind, the memory lingers, a place where survival, adaptation, and ingenuity are inseparable. You realize the medieval urban experience wasn't just about hardship. It was about the remarkable ways humans persist, find joy, and navigate the extraordinary tangle of danger and delight. And somehow, in that chaotic vitality, there's a lesson you carry forward. Even in the filthiest, most perilous environments, life finds a way to pulse with energy, humor, and hope. You step into a fog-drenched forest, the trees tall and skeletal, their bare branches reaching like twisted fingers. Somewhere deep in the shadows, a wolf howls, and you realize you've entered medieval European witchcraft and superstition, a world where fear and imagination shaped daily life as much as bread and water did. The villagers around you move cautiously, eyes flicking to dark corners, ears straining for whispers of spells, curses, or the faintest sign of evil. In one cottage, a woman stirs a pot of boiling herbs while muttering incantations under her breath. She is a healer, or a witch, depending on who tells the story. Her remedies are familiar yet strange. A pinch of crushed mandrake root for courage, dried nettles to ward off bad luck, and a silver pin to protect the wearer from the evil eye. You realize that in her hands, medicine and magic are inseparable. She tests her concoctions not with reason alone, but with intuition, ritual, and fear of unseen consequences. Superstition permeates every aspect of life. Farmers avoid sowing seeds on certain days, believing that the stars dictate growth. People carry charms and amulets, bones, stones, feathers, tucked into clothing, believing they repel curses or attract good fortune. Even livestock are marked with crosses or blessed water to ensure fertility and safety. You can see how rationality and ritual coexist uneasily, each reinforcing the other. But the stakes are high. Accusations of witchcraft can be deadly. You watch as a neighbor whispers to a magistrate that the old woman has unnatural knowledge, and you realize her life depends on her skill, her secrecy, and a fragile network of social alliances. Trials are terrifying spectacles. Suspects are tested by ordeal, dunked in water, pricked with pins, or forced to confess under threat of execution. Historians still argue whether many accused women were truly practicing magic or simply victims of paranoia, envy, or societal pressure. Either way, fear drives the machinery of accusation. Curious and grim details abound. Some charms involve human hair or nail clippings, collected secretly to manipulate others. Other potions mix herbs with bones, animal fat, or even small stones, meant to cure ailments or curse enemies. You shiver at the thought of these ingredients, and yet you understand. In a world without modern medicine or scientific understanding, people sought control wherever they could find it, even in the invisible realms of magic. Rituals often blend the ordinary with the bizarre. You see a family scattering salt at doorways to ward off demons, while chanting a prayer. In another field, a shepherd leaves an offering to ensure the safety of his flock. Even church authorities, while condemning heresy, sometimes incorporate local superstitions into blessings to maintain social cohesion. The line between sanctioned belief and forbidden magic is razor thin, shifting with politics, fear, and the whim of those in power. And yet, despite terror and suspicion, there is resilience. Communities adapt, forming networks of trust, exchanging knowledge, and negotiating survival in a landscape dominated by fear. The old woman continues her work quietly. The family continues their daily routines. The villagers continue to till their fields, all while living in the constant shadow of the unseen. As night deepens, the forest seems to breathe around you. Shadows lengthen, candles flicker behind windows, and you feel the pervasive tension of a society ruled by both tangible and intangible forces. Witchcraft is everywhere, sometimes imagined, sometimes real in its effects, but always shaping how people live, work, and survive. You step lightly, knowing that in this world, even the smallest misstep or whispered word can ripple outward with consequences far larger than you might imagine. And as you leave the forest behind, the lesson lingers. Fear and belief are powerful tools, capable of shaping communities, laws, and everyday life in ways both subtle and devastating. In the medieval mind, magic was not a fantasy. It was survival. You emerge from shadowed forests into the sun-scorched plains of ancient Mesopotamia, where irrigation channels snake across the earth like veins, and cities rise from clay in geometric perfection. Here, civilization hums with the constant rhythm of water, labor, and law, but you are quickly drawn to a stranger aspect, the laws themselves, carved into stone with brutal precision. The Code of Hammurabi, you remember, is one of the earliest known legal codes, a slab of basalt covered with tiny, meticulous cuneiform, writing detailing rules, punishments, and expectations. You step closer, imagining a man reading aloud the list of offenses: theft, adultery, debt, assault. The penalties are stark: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You flinch as you consider how literal these rules could be. And yet, there's an order to it, a sense that society functions better when everyone knows the stakes. You can almost hear the clatter of merchants, laborers, and scribes, each aligning their behavior with the weighty words of law carved into stone for all to see. But beyond this, there are peculiarities that make you pause. Some offenses are surprisingly specific. Failing to maintain your irrigation dike could bring severe punishment, even death, because a small mistake threatens the livelihoods of many. Lending grain improperly could incur heavy fines. Even medical malpractice appears. If a physician's treatment kills a patient, the doctor may suffer the same fate. You imagine a city buzzing with cautious, watchful citizens, each mindful not only of morality but of legal consequence. Historians still argue whether Hammurabi's code was enforced universally or largely aspirational, a guide meant to inspire compliance rather than an exact rulebook. But reading it, you feel the weight of its influence. Order and fear walk hand in hand. You can picture families teaching children from a young age: follow the rules, respect contracts, tend the canals, or risk brutal repercussions. The law is both shield and sword, offering protection while threatening punishment. Odd details abound. Contracts for marriage, apprenticeship, and commerce are highly ritualized, sometimes involving symbolic acts to seal the agreement. Witnesses swear on the names of gods, believing that divine oversight ensures honesty. And sometimes, punishments are designed to be public, humiliating, and unforgettable. An execution or mutilation on the marketplace steps serves as a warning to hundreds of onlookers. You shiver, imagining the spectacle and its effectiveness as social control. Despite the harshness, life continues in bustling harmony. Farmers tend crops, potters shape clay, and scribes record taxes and trades. There is pride in compliance and creativity within constraints. The legal system, though strict, ensures that society functions at a scale unimaginable in earlier eras. People navigate the complex interplay of gods, rulers, and laws, shaping their lives around systems designed to keep order in a sometimes chaotic world. And yet, the code reveals the fragility of civilization. Every rule assumes the infrastructure, social cohesion, and shared belief in authority. Failures, a breached canal, a dishonest trader, a violent neighbor, can ripple outward disastrously. It's a delicate balance, maintained not just by the threat of punishment, but by the awareness that every action is connected to a broader network of survival. You step back from the stone slab, imagining the hands that carved it, the citizens who obeyed it, and the rulers who enforced it. Mesopotamia feels alive in its combination of brilliance and brutality, a society held together by water, commerce, faith, and rules that are as terrifying as they are ingenious. You realize that in the end, civilization's earliest legal frameworks were about more than punishment. They were about creating a predictable world amid chaos, however uncomfortable the price. You now wander into the shadowed streets of Renaissance Venice, a city of canals, masked balls, and an unusual obsession with secrecy and appearance. The sun glints off the water, illuminating gondolas laden with silks and spices, and you realize that Venice was as much a city of image as of trade. But behind the ornate facades and glittering masks lies something peculiar. A culture obsessed with social surveillance and gossip, where everyone watched everyone else, and rumors carried consequences as sharp as a dagger. Walking along a narrow alley, you hear whispers from a merchant selling candied fruit and a tailor measuring a wealthy client. Names, deeds, and scandals are exchanged with the care of spies. People memorize every interaction, every slight, every favor. Because in Venice, social capital is currency, and even a whispered insult could mean ruin. You imagine attending a masked ball, laughter echoing through gilded halls, but every word weighed, every gesture analyzed. Discretion is as essential as beauty. The city's official censors and secret police, the Inquisitory di Stato, keep careful records, patrolling for sedition, heresy, or breaches of etiquette. Sometimes a minor infraction, like speaking ill of a noble or wearing the wrong color, can have lasting repercussions. Historians still argue how much actual power these enforcers wielded versus their reputation alone. To you, the very existence of this network hints at a fascinating tension: freedom versus control, appearance versus reality. Odd customs extend into everyday life. Venetians would often employ elaborate disguises even in daylight, wearing masks for extended periods to maintain anonymity in crowded streets. Some masks were decorative, others functional, designed to hide emotion or identity during negotiations or secret meetings. You can almost see a trader slipping a hand into a velvet pouch, eyes darting from shadow to shadow, balancing trust and suspicion in every deal. And yet, this vigilance was part theater, part survival. Gossip could elevate or destroy. A compliment might secure a marriage, while a rumor could exile a family. Venetians developed intricate networks of signaling, subtle gestures, and coded language to navigate these invisible currents. You can picture a merchant at the Rialto, nodding discreetly to a confidant while pretending ignorance to all others. Every glance, every whisper is fraught with meaning. Despite this, the city thrived. Trade routes spread across the Mediterranean, bringing wealth, ideas, and spices from distant lands. Artists, architects, and scholars flourished under the patronage of wealthy families who balanced risk and reputation carefully. Venice is both dazzling and dangerous, a place where beauty masks cunning, and where the clever survive by mastering observation as much as commerce. And amid it all, you notice the human impulse at play. People crave understanding, connection, and influence. Venice simply codified it with elaborate social structures, secret police, and a relentless gossip economy. You realize that even in modern times, echoes remain. humans remain fascinated by the private lives of others, trading secrets, reputations, and trust in a delicate dance of society. As twilight falls and lanterns reflect on the canals like scattered jewels, you step back and marvel at a city where intrigue and elegance coexisted so seamlessly. Venice feels alive, as though the past whispers directly into your ear. Beware, observe, adapt, and above all, understand that survival is as much about perception as it is about skill. You drift away from the glittering canals and find yourself in the dense, humid jungles of ancient Mesoamerica, surrounded by towering pyramids and the scent of wet earth. The city hums with life, merchants calling, priests chanting, children darting between market stalls. But what catches your attention is a practice that feels both shocking and profoundly meaningful. The ritual ball games of the Maya and Aztecs, where sport, religion, and politics intertwine in ways you might never have imagined. You watch as players, adorned in leather padding and elaborate headdresses, use their hips, elbows, and knees to strike a heavy rubber ball through stone hoops mounted high on temple walls. The game is brutal, athletic, and unrelenting. You can almost feel the vibrations of the ball thudding against the courts, smell the sweat and dust mixing in the midday heat. This isn't mere entertainment. The ball game is a reenactment of cosmic battles, a metaphor for the struggle between life and death, order and chaos. The stakes are staggering. In some instances, the losing team, or sometimes the winning one, depending on the ritual, faces sacrifice to the gods. Historians still argue whether the human sacrifices were always literal or sometimes symbolic, but the tension is palpable either way. You imagine the players, hearts pounding, aware that their performance is watched by rulers, priests, and citizens alike, that success or failure could mean honor or doom. But there's a lighter side too. Between games, vendors sell tamales, cacao drinks, and colorful feathers, turning the courts into bustling social hubs. Children watch and imitate, learning both skill and social norms. Nobles wager riches and prestige, and scribes record the outcomes for posterity. The ball game is theater, religion, politics, and community, all rolled into one. You realize it's a space where every movement has meaning, where play is inseparable from the structure of society itself. Odd traditions accompany the sport. Teams sometimes undergo ritual cleansing before matches, painting themselves in colors representing gods or celestial forces. Some players wear protective amulets or charms, while others carry ceremonial whistles. Even the ball is sacred, made from rubber and imbued with symbolic significance. You find it fascinating how deeply ritual infuses something that might, from the outside, look like pure competition. You notice parallels with other civilizations you've visited. The same human need to make life meaningful, to enact cosmic principles, to intertwine survival, faith, and community. Whether it's a Viking raven, a Heian nap, or a Mesoamerican ball game, people are searching for control over chaos, beauty in struggle, and significance in their daily existence. As the sun sets behind stone temples, shadows stretching long across the court, the chants fade, and the jungle hum returns. You feel the rhythm of an ancient heartbeat, alive in human endeavor, in ritual, in the relentless pursuit of understanding the world through action, symbol, and story. And somehow, you know that no matter how strange or violent the practice, it always speaks to a universal truth. Humans will create meaning, sometimes dangerous, sometimes beautiful, in the spaces where life and death meet. The jungle quiets as night fully settles. the last birds calling softly before sleep. You take a deep breath, the humid air filling your lungs, and feel the pulse of countless civilizations fading gently around you. From the scorched oracle bones of China to the floating gardens of the Aztecs, from Venetian whispers to Heian naps, the echoes of human life drift slowly into the night, each one a story of ingenuity, fear, beauty, and survival. You notice how all the practices, no matter how strange or unsettling, were attempts to tame uncertainty, to make sense of existence. People search for guidance, protection, and meaning wherever they could, through fire, feathers, water, law, ritual, or play. And though the centuries separate you, a quiet recognition settles in your mind. The impulse is familiar. It hums in your own dreams, in your habits, in the little ways you seek order and understanding in a chaotic world. The scenes soften now. You imagine flames dying low on distant pyres, gondolas gliding silently through moonlit canals, and the soft ripples of Chinampa canals in the fading light. Even the most bizarre rituals feel strangely comforting when you let them unfold gently in your mind. You realize that humanity has always found ways to navigate fear, uncertainty, and mortality with creativity, humor, and resilience. The wind howls as you find yourself deep in the medieval countryside, where peasant life pulses with a strange mix of simplicity and hardship. You notice the way the earth itself seems to control the rhythm of life, stubborn, unyielding, but giving. In these forgotten corners of the world, peasants live at the mercy of the seasons, their lives dictated by an intricate web of superstition, religion, and survival. The bizarre details of their existence strike you. There is a strange blend of rugged practicality and mysticism, both equally crucial to their daily survival. You watch a woman carefully picking herbs, whispering to herself as though the plants could hear her. She is not just gathering food or medicine, she is connecting with the ancient traditions passed down through generations. The roots she digs, the leaves she picks, each one has a purpose beyond the mundane. They protect, heal, and most importantly, they ward off the unseen forces that peasants believe haunt every corner of their world. In this land, illness isn't just a matter of bad luck. It's a curse, a punishment from the gods, or worse, from spirits seeking vengeance. Strange amulets hang from the necks of children, their small bodies swaddled in rough woolen cloth. Some are made of bone, others of stone, designed not just for warmth, but for protection. A simple twisted piece of iron nailed to a doorway is as common as a thatched roof, meant to keep evil spirits from crossing into the home. You catch a glimpse of an old man performing a ritual with an iron cauldron, his voice low and steady as he murmurs words you can't understand. The peasants aren't just living, they are always negotiating with the unknown, and to forget that would be to risk everything. In this world, there are no normal days. Everything is an event, a reminder of life's precariousness. Harvest festivals are sacred, but so are funeral rites, for the dead can never be fully trusted to stay gone. You notice that the ground is always dotted with symbols, drawn in ash or chalk, marking the boundaries between the living and the spirit world. A farmer's plow is never just for work. It's a ritual tool, one that demands respect from the land and from any spirits that may be watching. Work, ritual, and the supernatural. At the heart of medieval peasant life lies a tension between labor and ritual. The field, for all its labor, is just as much a battleground against forces beyond the control of mere mortals. You hear the rhythmic sound of a plow cutting through the soil, but it's clear the farmer isn't just tilling the land for food. he's tilting at invisible forces. In medieval England, peasants often buried tools in the field as offerings to appease the land's spirits, hoping for good crops and protection from the unpredictable forces of nature. Plowing wasn't a straightforward task. It was a sacred duty, performed with humility before the gods and spirits of the earth. You observe how each element of their lives is infused with superstition, a strange but necessary practice that holds the world together. In medieval Ireland, it was believed that the soil itself could become angry if not treated with the proper respect, and certain fields were thought to be cursed. In some places, peasants even left a portion of their crop behind, an offering to the spirits of the land to ensure that the harvest would be plentiful in the coming year. The strange reality is that medieval peasants lived not just in the physical world, but in a constant conversation with the unseen. Every action, from tilling the soil to making bread, was both practical and metaphysical. A loaf of bread wasn't just a meal, it was a sacrifice to the gods of hearth and home. Kneading dough was a quiet prayer, and placing the loaves into the oven was a gesture of thanks. Even the water they drank had meaning, drawn from wells that were thought to be touched by spirits, whose favor they had to earn with each dip of the bucket. You begin to understand how the natural world and the supernatural are inextricable. The peasants' rituals aren't just beliefs, they are woven into the fabric of survival. The act of working the land, of sowing and reaping, carries not only physical, but spiritual weight. A poor harvest wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a sign that the gods were displeased, that something was wrong with the balance of the world. And so, the peasants toil on, not just with their hands, but with their hearts and souls, constantly seeking the favor of the invisible world. Strange medieval beliefs. You continue to move through this world of superstition and labor, and you hear whispers of more bizarre practices. The peasants wear charms against the evil eye, strange symbols sewn into their garments or hung from their homes to ward off jealousy and misfortune. A particularly bizarre belief holds that the souls of the dead live on in the household's hearth. Therefore, each night, the fire must be carefully tended to keep the spirits satisfied. A hearth that is neglected is one that invites bad luck and misfortune. At festivals, peasants perform dances meant to keep disease at bay. In the year 1348, the Black Death ravaged Europe, and while modern minds understand its spread, the medieval peasants could only offer their prayers and perform bizarre rituals like flagellation to atone for perceived sins. They believed that suffering, be it through the dance of pain or through the sickening wails of the afflicted, could purify them. Even though they didn't fully understand the cause of the plague, they knew its wrath, and so their bodies became vessels of sacrifice to appease powers beyond comprehension. You walk through the fog and mist of the countryside, and the world you're witnessing begins to make sense in its own way. Each strange ritual is an attempt to take control of an uncontrollable world. Every superstition, every protective charm, every strange offering is a plea for survival in a world of chaos and disease, where death is as much a part of life as birth. The peasants live in a world where the boundaries between the supernatural and the natural are as thin as the air in the fields. You understand now, survival is not just about working the land. It is about living in harmony with both the seen and unseen, walking through life with one eye on the harvest and one eye on the gods. Because in the medieval world, what was just as likely to kill you wasn't always the sword or famine. It was the forces you could not see or understand. And so, the peasants continue, as they always have, surviving, praying, sacrificing, and above all, living with a strange resilience in the face of a world that often seems ruled by forces far more bizarre than they could ever hope to comprehend. As you walk deeper into the medieval countryside, the world of peasants unfolds before you, a strange fusion of superstition, toil, and invisible forces. Every action they take is laced with meaning, steeped in practices that seem bizarre, yet are essential to their understanding of the world. There's a curious truth here. The peasant life isn't just about working the land. It's about constantly appeasing, bargaining with, and fearing the unseen forces that control their fate. You come across a small farmstead where a man is carving strange runes into a wooden staff. You hear him muttering prayers to the four winds, each rune meant to channel a different elemental force. This isn't some artistic hobby. It's a deeply ingrained ritual, a way to ask the gods of wind and rain for mercy on his crops. The idea of wind as a god seems odd to you, yet in this world, the elements are as alive as people, each demanding respect and offering either bounty or destruction. You notice how careful the farmer is, his hands steady as he works the wood. To miscarve one symbol would bring bad luck, a failed harvest. It's also in the little things. In the simple practice of putting salt around the door frame before bed. Salt, a symbol of purity and protection, keeping out evil spirits. Salt was used in everything, from seasoning food to keeping away the spirits that roam the earth at night. You see a mother tossing a pinch over her left shoulder, whispering a prayer for her children's safety. To you, it seems trivial, a bit of superstition. But to her, it's a lifeline, a protection that the gods or spirits can bestow, even in this cruel, unpredictable world. The priest, too, carries out his own strange rituals. He doesn't simply say Mass. He prepares holy water in the morning, using it to sprinkle around the church, around the villagers, around the animals. A special prayer is said over the livestock, asking for protection from evil eyes that might be cast upon them. In this world, nothing is untouched by the supernatural. Animals are as much at risk of curse or blessing as people, and the idea of the evil eye is more than just a superstition. It's a real, tangible threat. The bargain with fate and the power of faith. As you move deeper into this world, you begin to see a pattern in the rituals. It's clear. These practices are about control, or the illusion of control. Peasants live in constant negotiation with an unpredictable world, and everything from their daily routines to their religious observances is designed to manage that chaos. Their faith is often a mixture of Christianity and older pagan beliefs, remnants of an ancient world that refuse to fade completely. You stop by a well, where an old woman is dropping a coin into the water, whispering a wish. To anyone else, it might seem like a simple prayer, but to her, this is a sacred bargain. She is asking for a blessing in return for a small offering. The water, she believes, is a conduit to a higher realm, a place where the gods and spirits listen to her humble request. You know the history. Water, in ancient beliefs, was seen as a pathway between worlds. It's fascinating how the practical, getting water to drink, becomes wrapped up in these layers of belief. You move toward the village square, where a gathering is underway. The local priest is leading a procession, carrying relics and chanting prayers to protect the village from a string of misfortunes, sickness, crop failure, and even a recent string of mysterious animal deaths. People stand in line to kiss the relics, each taking their turn to offer devotion. It seems like a simple act, yet beneath it, there's something deeper, an unspoken pact between the villagers and their faith. They believe that the relics, imbued with the Holy Spirit, hold the power to stave off the forces they cannot understand or fight. Yet there's something more unusual still. The fact that this procession isn't just religious, it's also political. You realize that religion in this world isn't a separate sphere. It permeates all aspects of life. The priest doesn't just speak to God, he speaks for the community. He's an intermediary between the villagers and the forces of nature, fate, and authority. But he is also part of the power structure, a man who not only guides the souls of the faithful, but also helps maintain social order. In this world, religion and politics are inextricable, and the balance is fragile. Divine justice and the fear of divine wrath. You stay for the gathering, listening to the priest's sermon. The air is thick with incense, the crowd attentive, eyes focused on the priest as he speaks of divine justice, of sin, and of the need to repent. There's something unsettling in his words. He speaks not only of God's will, but of the wrath that could fall upon them if they fail to observe the sacred laws of the land. His voice rings with authority, but also with a subtle, fear-laden warning. Break the rules, and you will face divine retribution. You wonder, as you watch the faces of the peasants, how many of them truly believe in the priest's message, and how many simply obey out of fear. Fear of divine wrath, fear of the unknown, fear of punishment, not just from the church, but from the forces of nature, the spirits of the land, and the very gods themselves. What seems like a routine sermon is actually a reminder. Human actions are always watched, always judged, and the consequences are dire. For in this world, gods are not benevolent figures who help you when you're in need. They are demanding, volatile, and capricious. You hear rumors of the last unfortunate soul who defied the priest's teachings, someone who was said to have mocked the divine laws in private. It's a chilling tale. The person was found dead under suspicious circumstances, and the entire village believes that their death was the result of divine retribution. As you ponder this, the idea of divine justice takes on a more sinister tone. It's not just about faith, it's about survival. In a world where life is fragile and death is ever present, even the slightest breach of societal norms could bring about a curse, a punishment that no one can escape. Living in the balance between order and chaos. The deeper you go into this world, the more you see. Medieval peasants lived in a constant state of negotiation with forces they couldn't control, whether through faith, rituals, or belief in the supernatural. Their world was both fragile and resilient, shaped by invisible forces that could either bless them with plenty or curse them with ruin. Survival wasn't just about hard work. It was about navigating this dangerous, volatile balance between order and chaos, and hoping that the gods, spirits, and natural forces would smile upon you. The bizarre, seemingly strange practices you've witnessed, the protection charms, the sacred coins, the rituals to appease the spirits of the land, are not just superstitions. They are lifelines, created out of necessity. In a world where knowledge of the physical world was limited, these rituals were a way for the peasants to exert control over the unknown. As you leave the village, the sun sinking low behind the hills, you carry with you the image of a society deeply rooted in a web of belief, superstition, and faith. You now understand that in the medieval world, living was about more than surviving the harsh conditions. It was about understanding and respecting the forces of the world, visible and invisible, and always, always keeping them in balance. The rituals of life and death, the peasant's final bargain. As you move through the late afternoon light, a heavy stillness settles over the countryside. The path you walk is trodden, yet the world feels strangely untouchable, as though you're walking through a dream. A world where the living are constantly preparing for the next step, death. You find yourself at the edge of a small village where the rhythm of daily life merges seamlessly with rituals of the afterlife. This is a place where the dead never truly leave, where their spirits are woven into the very fabric of the peasant's existence. You stumble across a quiet, worn cemetery. It's not the well-kept, serene place of modern-day remembrance, but an earthy, rugged plot of land, marked by crude wooden crosses and rough-hewn stones. Some of the gravestones are so simple they almost blend with the earth, while others bear intricate carvings, reminding you that these graves were not merely places of burial. They were places of ritual, protection, and honor. In this world, death was as much about ritual as life, and every step taken toward the afterlife was steeped in mystery. You stop by a small grave where a fresh offering of bread and a sprig of rosemary has been laid. You overhear an elderly woman explaining to a child that the rosemary is to help the spirit of the dead find peace in the afterlife. It's common practice for the dead to be honored with offerings like bread, wine, or even small trinkets, meant to appease their spirits and ensure that they do not return as vengeful ghosts. The peasant belief in the power of the dead is palpable. Death is not an end, but a transition. A soul, once departed, is never truly gone, and the living must constantly navigate the delicate dance between honoring the dead and ensuring they don't return with malicious intent. As night begins to fall, you feel the temperature drop sharply. The air is thick with the weight of history, with memories long buried beneath the earth. In this village, life and death are inextricably connected. When someone dies, the community doesn't just mourn, they prepare. Rituals begin long before the funeral, with the living engaging in practices that range from prayers to rituals involving sacred herbs. You see an old man stirring a pot over a fire, muttering incantations. This is not just for comfort, it is for protection. He's making a special brew of herbs believed to ward off the spirits that might be drawn to the funeral. In this world, a simple death could stir all kinds of spirits, some benign, some restless, and some downright vengeful. You begin to realize that the afterlife in the medieval peasant world is a far more complex and precarious affair than what you might have imagined. For the peasants, death is not just an individual experience. It is a community affair, one that involves both the living and the dead. The boundary between the two is porous, and rituals serve as the only safeguard between the two worlds. Communal mourning and the fear of the unknown. The rituals surrounding death are not just for the deceased, but for the entire community. You hear a group of women, dressed in black shawls, preparing for the evening's wake, where the body of the deceased will be kept overnight, watched by loved ones. The wake is more than a vigil. It's a communal act of protection and preparation. The body is kept in a room that is carefully guarded, as the spirits of the deceased are believed to have the power to enter the home, causing illness, misfortune, or worse. A special candle is lit in the room, its flame symbolizing the soul's journey toward peace and the light that will guide it safely. In this world, there is no simple acceptance of death. There is fear of what lies beyond. You see it in the way the villagers look around nervously, as though expecting the spirits of the dead to appear at any moment. At the wake, the air is thick with stories about the departed. Were they good? Were they wicked? What did their death mean for the village? Every death is imbued with mystery. Was it a punishment, a test, a sign from the gods? These questions are more than metaphysical. They are about survival. If the death is seen as a curse, the whole village is at risk. But if it's seen as a blessing or a natural part of life, then the community can breathe easy. As the night deepens, you witness an extraordinary scene. The villagers gather in a circle around the deceased's home, passing around a wooden bowl filled with bread and wine, the symbolic nourishment for both the body and the soul. The bread, a staple of life, is offered to ensure that the soul of the deceased doesn't return hungry or restless. The wine is to calm the spirit, offering it peace before it embarks on its journey. It's a simple act, but one laced with deep belief. Here, food isn't just sustenance, it's a gift to the dead, a way of ensuring that they cross over to the afterlife without leaving a trace behind in the land of the living. You feel a sense of reverence as you watch the group huddle together, their faces lit by the soft glow of candlelight. Even in their fear, the villagers are united by a shared understanding that death is just one part of the grand circle of life. And the rituals, as strange as they may seem, are not just to ward off evil, but to invite peace. By honoring the dead in such an intimate and tangible way, the peasants are doing what they can to balance the energies of life and death in a world that offers no guarantees. The peasants bargain: work, ritual, and the promise of safety. As dawn approaches, you walk away from the cemetery, your heart heavy with the understanding that death is not something the peasants simply endure. It is something they negotiate with every single day. Their rituals, their prayers, their offerings, all are designed to ensure their survival, not just through hard work, but through faith and superstition. The peasants are survivors, not just because they work the land and face the harsh elements, but because they have learned how to live with the invisible, the spirits, the curses, the gods. Their lives are a dance with the unseen, a constant bargaining for protection, for peace, and for the chance to survive another season. As the sun begins to rise, you realize that the medieval peasant's life is not just about labor. It's about an ongoing bargain with the world around them, a bargain that requires their respect, their faith, and sometimes their very souls. And while it might seem strange, there is a kind of wisdom in it, a deep understanding that life and death are two sides of the same coin. They are constantly negotiating their place in both, hoping that the gods, the spirits, and the unseen forces of nature will smile on them just a little longer. As the night draws in, the world of medieval peasants fades quietly into the background, leaving behind the faint scent of herbs, the flicker of candlelight, and the quiet hum of an unseen world. You reflect on the strange and resilient lives these peasants led, tethered as much to the invisible world as to the earth beneath their feet. Their world, where survival isn't just about farming or hard work, but about rituals, faith, and the constant negotiation with forces they could neither see nor understand. The alchemist's potions, the healer's herbs, and the superstitions woven into everyday life weren't mere eccentricities. They were the lifelines that held their fragile world together. Every charm, every incantation, every strange offering made sense in a world where death loomed large, where the invisible world of spirits and gods could either bless or curse them. They didn't have the luxury of skepticism, because in this life, survival was the greatest gamble. you realize that these rituals, while bizarre and often strange to modern sensibilities, were born from a deep human need to find meaning, to control what couldn't be understood, to create a sense of order in a chaotic world. And though these ancient practices may seem outlandish, they speak to a very human truth: the desire to live, to ward off misfortune, and to create connections to the world beyond our understanding. As you settle into the quiet of your own space, let the images of the alchemist's lab, the herbalist's shack, and the villager's prayers gently fade from your mind. There's comfort in knowing that while the details of their world may be strange, the instincts that shaped them, the drive to survive, to adapt, and to believe, are not so different from our own. Let this quiet journey linger softly in your mind as you drift toward sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams. Eat.